Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. I've got a post-holiday gift for you, and for me, for that matter. I'm sure there was a combination of curiosity and perhaps an eye roll or two when you saw that I was doing a Kansas City profile of Jayne Siemens of Venice Communications. Not because Jayne Siemens of Venice Communications is not an accomplished person with a fascinating backstory, an interesting childhood, a laser-like focus on her passion of music that carried her to some of the heights of the ever-so-competitive opera world, attending some of the finest schools in the world, performing at the Chicago Lyric Opera and places in Europe and London and all around the world, as a matter of fact, but eventually doing what many artists have to do, decide to take a different course in their life while still trying to maintain the passion for the music they love. Jayne Siemens did that and eventually became the president of her own company, Venice Communications, a Kansas City public relations firm. But all along the way, she maintained the passion for music, and in the past decade or so has revisited it, and often still performs at recitals here and, in fact, across the pond in Europe, which she will do next month for a Valentine's concert in Halifax, England. All along the way, music has been the thing, but it hasn't been the only thing for Jayne Siemens, and that's why now she is the 20-year-on president of Venice Communications. The story of someone from a small town, Newton, Kansas, just outside of Wichita, who made it big and has continued to this day to accomplish great things, one of which probably isn't deciding to marry Danny Clinkscale of the Reasonably Irreverent podcast. The story of Jayne Siemens, a great conversation with her, coming up next on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is "Where Integrity Matters." Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice, regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Ms. Siemens, tell me your first cognitive memories of being a little girl in Newton, Kansas.
Playing outside with my dad on Hillcrest Road with our good friends down the street, Dale Plummer and his family.
And what age would that be when you really kind of have a memory of that?
5-ish.
That sounds about the time when most people start to have memories. You were a girl of the early 60s. At that time, we were getting to be the mid-60s. What was it like living in Newton, Kansas at that time of Americana?
Well, it was a small town, and it was great because you got to know so many people, and everybody knew everybody. And it was kind of a unique experience. I think I appreciate it more now than I did then in some ways because it was a very close-knit community, and even there was a lot of competition among the kids, people were still pulling for each other.
What did your dad do?
He worked, just before I was born, he worked for Vornado Fans in Wichita and started their HR department when HR departments didn't exist. And then he worked for 30 years at Heston Corporation as VP of HR and Administration, which is was a large farm equipment company.
Your mom was an accomplished and college-educated woman, but she dedicated herself to you and your older sister and was a stay-at-home mom. What was she like as a stay-at-home mom?
You know, my mom was a perfectionist, and she loved a beautiful house, and she loved making sure that when we entertained, that people were having a great time. She was also an educator and child psychologist. She got her master's when I was in grade school. So I sat in the WSU library while she was getting her master's. And she worked with kids, and when I was in children's theater, she was there rooting everybody along.
When you have a sibling, your older sister, Emily, but she's quite a few years your senior. So when you were really young, like 5 or 6 years old, 6, 7, at that age, what was your relationship like then? Because there was a separation of a few years.
You know, she always, how do I put it, paved the way. She's a very different person from me, but very smart. And she was also in theater. But she was very different. So I think it always took teachers a few minutes to go, oh, so you're this person. When
did you feel like you had I know it was at a young age, but when did you start to feel that being a performer was in your blood?
Well, and this is in my bio, so I can say this. My mom had the forethought to put me in drama class when I was 5 and ballet in Wichita with this fabulous teacher. And I'll never forget the first time we actually did scene work. I was supposed to be a squirrel, and I was a hunting squirrel in the woods. And how I don't forget this, it's an interesting thing. I went out to the middle of the stage, took the stage, and immediately felt this sense of power and like, I love this.
How old were you then?
5.
Wow, 5 years old. And so there was almost from that point forward, there was not a single-minded focus, but this was something clearly that you had a passion for and were going to work at.
It was always there, yes. That's true.
And I'll take us through some of the steps along the way from the squirrel days of 5.
Well, funny thing was I actually was rather sickly in 3rd and 4th grade, and so I didn't get to go out and do all the tumbling. I mean, I was out during recess, but I always liked being inside, getting ready for the next, children's play that was going on. But I actually, the first big moment was in 4th grade. I got to, like a lot of singers do, sort of found my voice at church and got to do a solo. They must have known I had some kind of voice because I just did it. And I don't remember, that's the first time I sang, and I haven't stopped singing since 4th grade.
Your father was obviously an executive in a company, and you mentioned the entertaining, and there was a lot of that was sort of a prerequisite of maybe that position. Do you remember ever, was this the type of thing where there'd be 12 or 15 or 20 people over at your house for a dinner party or something, and they trotted Jane out to sing?
Oddly enough, that wasn't, thank God, because that would have been rather odd. I don't remember ever doing that. I do remember this at the country club. I don't remember this, though. I would still be in my swimming suit, and if they put music on, like there was a dance going on, I'd come out in the middle of the dance floor and start twisting. And so that might have given you some inkling of that had no inhibitions when it came to being in front of people. As a matter of fact, I just thought of another 4th grade memory. My mom let me audition for Wichita Children's Theater and had the opportunity to be the Little Boy Blue, the MC of the show where Helen Hayes was performing.
Wow.
Got to meet her when I was in 4th grade. And so there was that kind of energy going on in that area in theater, which was fabulous to tap into when I was so young.
What are your memories of that great lady?
Helen was the kindest person, and she actually took me under her wing for a few moments, which is amazing at that level, to talk to me after our performance, to share with me some of her history on the Broadway stage and what she loved about the stage. And we talked a lot about stage presence, because some people are gifted with that and others have to work at it. And so she talked about it originally having to work at that, if you can believe it or not. She's a rather shy lady, or was, and but you just don't forget. You don't forget.
People listening to this might kind of wonder what would have brought Helen Hayes to Wichita.
Well, we had an amazing environment in music and theater, and we still do in the Wichita, Newton area. Osythe Deersmith Moore, who was the drama and ballet teacher, she had connections to all of these people, as did Irene Vickers Baker, who was a well-known philanthropist in Wichita, and the Vickers name is throughout. They had the connections to bring in people of Helen Hayes' stature, and that was a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Your family wasn't rich per se, but comfortable, I guess we can say, and a good position for your father, and only 2 children. I say only because I grew up in a family of 6, and I know the limitations that can put on it, and we likely would have had more if circumstances were different. But anyway, you were afforded a lot of opportunities. Your family traveled a lot, and so you were kind of a worldly young person, I guess.
Well, it's funny. We traveled. That's true. We did travel. We were in Hawaii when I was in 2nd grade, and then in junior high, we did end up going to Europe and London. And I remember vividly being really affected by the UK and wanting to spend more time there. And it was tremendous because learning more about different cultures, no matter what you do in life, I wish more of our politicians would be thusly educated. But that was tremendous, and eventually that really helped, having had some of that background as a child.
When you're traveling, you did a lot of road trips. I know that, a lot of driving. And as I said, you had a sibling who was a little bit older than you, not like you were 1 or 2 years apart. What were the dynamics of that like? I've heard some of the stories, so...
Oh, my God. Well, Emily and I can attest to a couple of memories. You just don't forget, when you're sitting in the back seat, on your way to Michigan or something like that, and you start throwing things at each other in the back seat with 2 dachshunds, fighting with each other. And, you stop for things like Lay's potato chips, Wonder Bread, and, cold hot dog sandwiches. You don't forget. But you know what? We actually ended up, we used to be able to drive into Mexico. We'd go down to Mazatlan.
Right.
And we had a great time. Emily had her birthday down there and had a fantastic piñata party, but she was sort of other directed. I stuck myself in the bathroom and started, how do I put this? Playing characters with my dad's then bowler hat in the mirror, and I locked myself in the bathroom in Mazatlan. You don't forget a day like that. They had to shimmy up a ladder to get me out.
How would you describe your parents' relationship from the view of a young girl as you were growing up? I mean, a lot of times you don't see maybe what you would hear later, and most people probably have a rather idealized version of what their parents' relationship is like. But what did you feel like it was like?
They were very intense German perfectionists in their different ways. My dad was, calmer, and yet he was rather authoritarian, but very kind and very loving. And my mom had an ear for music because her whole family and my grandfather on her side, which I never knew, they all played instruments and she sang. So she was always inspiring me to do what I ended up doing for quite a long time. But, there was no question that she was the one sort of managing the household. I mean, that's probably not that unusual for most families, but she was a perfectionist, and you could tell, and everyone knew it. She could be really tough, But on the other hand, that was something that was very valuable to me in the long run.
You seem to have thrived on that particular structure and discipline at your young age and seem to be maybe more laser focused than most kids of your age, of that age.
Yeah, that's probably, for some people, they'd probably say what I ended up doing and the way I functioned during college and high school, I probably, to them, didn't have as much fun as what people think fun is. But for me, to this day, working on great pieces of music is a joy for me. And for some people, it was like going out to, smoke some weed. I had trouble doing that in college because it would wreck my voice. It's not like I didn't want to. I sort of did once in a while. But you know what I mean? It's like, so that interest in structure was never a problem for me. And it's a good thing.
So what was it like? What was the high school Jayne Siemens like? You mentioned the focus, and maybe you didn't want to do some of the things that other people did, and you obviously were performing in all the shows, and I've seen photos, and obviously it was an accomplished high school as far as things were concerned. So being a railroader, what was a railer?
Oh, yeah, railers. I had 4 music classes my senior year of high school. That was how lucky we were to be able to do that. I don't think you can do that anymore. It's really unfortunate. So it was exceptional there. Our orchestra and band leader of our music program, he wrote jazz charts for people like Clark Terry, Buddy Guy. I mean, it's amazing. Sitting in Newton, Kansas. So we had excellent instruction. But, I would say in high school, I had great friends, and they're friends of mine to this day. A lot of people probably kind of wondered what she was up to because I sort of tried to stay away from the cliques. But I liked people from all over, people throughout my high school. And I probably got to be friends with most of the people, that were in the music program. And we've stayed friends since then.
But as a young teenager, you had a sister who was about to be college age and or then was college age. So you had some rather grown-up experiences for a young teenager.
I see where you're going here. Yeah, Emily, it was great because when I was 7th grade, she was already at KU. And so we had some times where my mom, I don't know how this ever happened, actually. She dropped me off, and I would just end up staying the weekend with Emily. And how do I put this? She was in the, early 70s era where there was a lot of fun going on. So I was sort of watched, but not too far from the reality of what was going on. We had a blast, and I got to know, her boyfriend and all the people she hung out with. So I did party in 7th grade with my sister. So I can have fun.
Yes, yes, indeed. At what point in high school, in doing all these shows and doing leads and being accomplished in that area, did you have an idea that where this journey was going to go as far as college is concerned, and that at what point did you really absolutely realize that this was a vocation you were going to make?
Well, I don't think I ever didn't think I was, but what was really great is Gary Fletcher, the man I mentioned, ran our music program, who wrote these great jazz charts, fabulous musician. I remember he left us our junior year. It was a crushing blow to me because I'd known him since 4th grade. And he decided to go on to other things. But I remember before he left, because he knew how devastated I was, he handed me my first opera recording, a personal recording with Joan Sutherland on it. And he was giving me his blessing that he thought that it was probably wise for me to consider pursuing this. And I also went to Interlochen Arts Academy in the summer for 2 summers. And that opened up to international students from all over the world that were interested in the same things I were. One of my best friends there is a Tony Award winner, Victoria Clark, and that was a tremendous experience. I've been friends with many of the people that I met there for life, and it really opened doors.
I've been there. People may not know listening to this, and some will, it's a very highly accomplished people go there. I mean, you just can't up and go. Just tell to me a little bit more about that experience over those couple of summers.
Well, you have to audition. Now, it's now online, but it used to be where you would send in a cassette tape, which took way longer for them to assess who was going to get in or not. So, and it was also, you were assessed by your grades, and you had references already. So there was that expectation. I was in the operetta program and also in the musical theater program. I was a clarinetist, too, and I unfortunately couldn't do it all. I brought it with me, but it kind of sat there because I ended up focusing on that. We worked with the most phenomenal people in this gorgeous outdoor setting. Everybody was in cabins. The boys were on one side, the girls were on the other. And it was just an eye-opening experience of what the potential is. I remember walking down to Kresge Auditorium, which is their big outdoor auditorium where all the operettas were performed. For the first time walking through, nobody was there, and I was listening to this violist playing a concerto by herself on the stage. I'm like, oh my God, I've never heard anything so great. She was a junior in high school, Amy Branfenbrenner. She ended up going on to create a number of very well-known string quartets and has played throughout the world. And her brother, who's a really good friend of mine, Mark, is with the Lyric Opera of Chicago Orchestra, where I ended up. These people are all friends to this day. And so it was a lightning rod. And the energy was so palpable that you couldn't help but try to be your best.
When it came time to go off to college, what was the decision-making process like for you, and what were the options that you looked at?
You know, I looked at a number of Northwestern, University of North Carolina School of the Fine Arts, Boston University, Michigan. What else? I did look at Juilliard. So, you know, there was some, Michigan has a top music school there. I ended up going to BU my first year because I think I liked the disco dancing that was going on there as much as, should I say that? I did have fun. See, I did have fun. It was the disco era. I was singing opera and then I was dancing disco at night. I went to BU my first year, wasn't in love with my voice teacher, and it ended up transferring to Michigan. I knew a lot of the teachers at Michigan because I'd gone to Interlochen up in northern Michigan. So that's where I ended up getting my degree.
How difficult a decision was it to change, or during the course of that year at Boston University, which becomes ironic later on since I was around there then, was the circumstance such that really as the year went on, you kind of realized that this was going to be one and done?
You know, I had this contralto voice teacher, Mary Davenport, and she was an amazing woman, really well-known singer in opera, but I couldn't relate to her technique. And in opera, this is the tricky part about making decisions. You know, if I'd gone into musical theater, there's voice technique, but that's more on the acting side. And I'd done so much theater, I really got excited about working on my vocal technique. And I didn't quite think she understood a higher voice because I have a really high soprano voice. And so who am I to say? But it was really important for me to find the right person to click with.
When you went to Michigan, did it feel like, okay, this is the right thing?
Absolutely. It was immediately the right thing. A good friend of mine who was at BU with me, transferred with me, John Murrell, who had gone to New Trier High School, which everyone knows is extraordinarily famous high school.
Right.
Charlton Heston went there,
John
Rock
Belushi
Hudson,
went there.
John Belushi.
Right.
What's her face from? Oh my God, can't say her name. I'll say it in a minute. So I met all these great talents from New Trier, and three of those guys wrote an original musical while I was at Michigan. And so the first semester I was there, they cast me as the lead in that. So I just immediately connected with amazing talent there. And I enjoyed my voice teacher. She was a tough, really well-known Czechoslovakian voice teacher. They are what they are. She was really good, but she was really tough. But that's the way the music business is.
Well, I've told this story a million times. We went back for a reunion a few years ago for the music school, and we went to a football game. They had tickets to the football game. I was part of it. And I attended that game at the Big House, iconic football palace of college football. And that was the first game I had ever been there, and it was the second game you had ever been at Michigan, which I guess describes the focus of your world there.
Okay, so here was the deal. We had all our rehearsals for Gilbert and Sullivan operettas were in a building right next to the stadium, and inevitably we'd have rehearsals that we had to get to just as people were leaving the stadium. It was always swimming uphill when it had to do with what was going on in sports at Michigan. But I'd venture to say their music program, there's so many people on Broadway from Michigan now. They had a Michigan on Broadway show that a friend of mine conducted a couple years ago. So I would say it's pretty balanced now.
That's true. And obviously you had great experiences there. And I don't know whether it was your trip to Europe earlier, but you wanted to go to graduate school and you went to one of the best in the world.
Well, what I did is I finished at Michigan, and I took a couple years as a starving artist at New York for a few years, and did some singing, did concerts there, worked at a wholesale children's clothing firm called Her Majesty Industries, which I loved actually. But I felt like in opera you have to keep your voice maturing, and again I had this thing about the UK, so I had an opportunity to get a Fulbright to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London.
How many years after undergrad did you go to London? It was
3.
Okay.
And it was tremendous. Got my master's in opera performance there. And Guildhall is where many of the well-known Orlando Bloom, all of the major, English actors, not all, but many, many, many of them have gone there. So it was tremendous because even though I was in the opera program, I was around a lot of these amazing theater actors, and we got to take part in those classes as well. It was fantastic. It was right in the middle of downtown London, really close to St. Paul's.
Was that in any way an intimidating experience? I mean, although you'd been in New York for 3 years, so maybe not.
It was an interesting thing. I must like that life. It's rather lonely because it's so competitive. It's not like you're there to party with everybody and just have a good social time, even though to this day,
right.
In fact, I'm doing a concert with one of my dear friends who I sang with there in a month where she lives in Halifax. So that gives you an idea how close you get to people, even though you're only there for 3 years. It was an amazing experience. Intimidated. I think maybe so, because the higher up you get, the more competition there is, and the better everyone's getting. And so you have to keep your game up.
Immediately after you graduate from Guildhall or get your master's, whatever that, I don't know if that's called graduation because I didn't get my master's. I never contemplated getting a master's. What did you do immediately after that?
I sang in Austria and Switzerland and Germany for a time. A lot of American singers kind of jump over there. We literally had auditions for agents, and they had no warm-up rooms, and you were standing in the middle of a park in Germany and singing opera, and people would walk by and talk to you. It was the most bizarre experience, but it was a great experience because the European houses are smaller, and there's such a love for opera and classical music there. It was a tremendous experience.
How long did you do that before you returned to the States?
Just a few years.
A few? A couple? You want to count for me?
Well, I can't. It's been so long. I guess 3. I want to say 2 or 3.
What was the decision-making process to return to the United States?
I missed fried chicken and iced tea, and no.
Well, you do. You still enjoy those.
I guess part of it was that I had some dear friends that were in Chicago, dear friends that are in the classical music field, and they lured me back to audition for the Lyric Opera of Chicago, which is a well-known opera house in the United States. And I think I was ready to come back. And
that ended up being sort of a life-changing experience. You were accomplished enough to be performing at a fantastic opera company, but you would have to, I mean, it wasn't a full-time job per se.
Right.
So what was that experience like? What were the challenges of it?
Well, that's, you're working with the best of the best. We would have rehearsals in the afternoon and evenings. At my level, I was in the ensemble, so that would be getting small roles, but also being in the chorus. And you were getting, AGMA scale. So you're like, oh gosh, I need to pay rent. So I was working temporary jobs in marketing and PR departments throughout the city, working for a lot of different types of businesses. But we were working with Domingo, Pavarotti, all the famous opera singers at that time. And it was an extraordinary experience. It was an unusual time. It was the mid to late 80s. And there was tremendous opportunity there, but there was also, your voice was looked at like a microscope, and they kind of forgot about all the other stuff that you're actually supposed to be doing on stage, was is actually creating character. But that's what you have to do when you're weeding people out. And it's very stressful because you've got international singers coming in at the same time you're trying to build your career. But that's what the expectation is. So there was a love for it, but there was also some heartache there. Half of our choir died of AIDS.
Right.
Half of our choir died of AIDS when I was there. And you cannot look upon that time without some real sadness. So there was this weird juxtaposition of that environment. At the same time, there was no Me Too environment going on there. Then you had like the ultra heterosexual conductors and Domingos of the world coming in, and there was just an understanding that the world worked that way. And so you had a choice whether you wanted to keep going in an environment like that or not. So it was a tricky time for me.
You got an emotional boost at one point in time when you were down, having a bad day, on an experience in your building with one Mr. T.
Oh, my God. Well, I hadn't thought of that one in a while. Okay, so I lived at McClurg Court, which I think is now a condo building in Streeterville. It's 39 floors, so you have a hell of a long time going up and down, if you're coming from the top floor. And Mr. T happened to live in our building. And, and this is one of a couple of times I can think of where I probably had an audition that didn't go as well, or I didn't like the wig I was wearing on stage. Who knows? But I got on the elevator, and I'm on the elevator with him on and off all the time, so I didn't think about him. I was just in my mood. And he looks at me and he goes, "The world can't be that bad." In his own voice. Completely changed my mood by the time I got up to the 39th
Get that chin
floor.
up.
Yes, exactly. Keep that chin up. And he had his gold chains on, by the way, everybody. And so there were moments like that. I mean, I had a time where I was, I'd gone to an audition. Oh, I remember. I was on my way to one and I was late. And of course, the traffic was horrendous. I jumped in a cab, and this guy from some, Middle Eastern country, I said, "Go to 35 Whacker." And he looks at me in the rearview mirror and he goes, "You be looking like you're going to kill me." And immediately, of course, my mood changed. But there was a lot of stress at that time. But there was such great love. I love Chicago. I consider it my second home. I know every crack in the sidewalk. And Lyric Opera is a great place.
How long were you there?
6 years.
And at what point did you start to think that things were maybe going to turn in another direction, or this was becoming too much of a challenge for you?
Well, it was funny because I saw some people. I think this was the difference in me to in degree of other singers. Some singers I was working with, this was like be all and end all for them. It was like this was this career or nothing. And I always had these other interests. I always, when you're doing PR for yourself, which is what you are doing as a performer, no matter what, I was always rather gregarious. I love talking to the dry cleaners. I love, as I said, Her Majesty Industries, the wholesale children's clothing firm. I can tell you about every single person in that building at the time I was working there, because regular people and regular life is very valuable to me. And there's a rather, in opera, there's a rather elitist mentality. And I don't say this in a bad way. It's just the way it is. You have to have money people feeding this into this nonprofit environment in order to keep this going. So there's a certain tone to that atmosphere. And some people, they're riding high on making sure that's everything in their life. And I thought, you know what? I have things I love to do other than this, and I'm not sure I'm loving this in this environment anymore. And I want to keep loving music. So I felt it was time for me to rethink whether I wanted to do this forever, but still love it.
And what came to be the not breaking point, I guess it was. Do you remember the day you really made the decision that you were going to step aside?
You know, I was on my way to a coaching with someone who's well known in the industry. Not an easy person to deal with, and that was not unusual. And I was like, wow. As I was walking there, I was walking slower and slower. Like, you know what? This is not fun anymore at this particular level for me. And I thought, you know what? It's time to rethink this. And so I didn't even go in. And then I called him later. I said, you know what? I think I'm done with this level. And because I think, again, it becomes less about building and nurturing you as a performer versus how
judging
do we,
you.
What'd you say?
Judging you and weeding you out. And I think that's a real problem in all of education, in especially classical music, which is, we'll get to another topic on that one. But anyway, the long story short, I have been doing all this work for all these different companies, and I had a mentor who helped me kind of transition and start thinking about developing my skills in PR and marketing. So that's when I started transitioning. The transition comes next, as our guest is Jayne Siemens from Venice Communications, as we'll take a time out and move on to phase 2. But phase 1 is always a part of your life, and we'll talk about singing to this day and many other things, dogs, me, whatever, coming up next on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. It's part of the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast lineup right here at DannyClinkscale.com.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
There's no need to get a case of the Mondays every week, not during football season anyway. Hey, this is Matt Llewellyn from the 23rd Street Brewery, and we are the place for Monday Night Football. Food and drink specials every week, and all new televisions always at 23rd Street Brewery. The hardest thing about Mondays now will be getting through the workday, although waking up on Tuesdays might be a little bit tough. But remember, watch all the Chiefs games, NFL games, every game at the 23rd Street Brewery.
Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Visions' goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. Are you thinking of starting a new business? Does your current business feel stuck? Or are you just trying to grow what you already have? Running a business is a lot of work, and it takes the right team to make it all happen. If you're looking to grow your business, call my friends Ben and Greg over at Fuego Consulting. They put together a company that can help you reach your business goals. Whether you're looking to get online, build a social media strategy, or rebrand your business, they can help. Call Fuego at 816-663-9695 or visit them online at fuegoconsulting.com. Fuego Consulting. Let's grow your business together. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyClinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Welcome back to Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. I'm Danny Klinkscale. Our victim guest today is Jayne Siemens, president of Venice Communications. We'll get to that in a little bit. And, of course, we'll also get to the fact that a very lowly accomplished part of the story is that she would eventually become my wife, which is not at all really why I did this. I think this is a fascinating story, although Jayne may be a little reticent about that aspect of it. So you decide that as far as being a full-time professional, you're going to stop singing and move on. How long did you stay in Chicago?
I was there for a couple of years and had a really good opportunity. My mentor helped me get a job working for a company that this was during the time when the giant pharmaceutical companies were still having their national sales meetings, which were huge, and they needed PR planning, they needed event planning, and they also needed someone who could go out and actually win the business. And so I got this really unique opportunity, and so I walked indoors like, Chicago has every company known to man: Sara Lee, Walgreens, Sunbeam, Abbott Labs was one of our clients, and so it was that was a tremendous experience. But it was, it was a transition. There's no question about it.
Was there ever buyer's remorse, as it were, over the couple of years there? What was the withdrawal process like from being a full, professional singer?
After that job, I had met the man who was the head of San Diego Opera, and he knew about my background, and he goes, "Why don't you come be our director of PR and marketing there?" I thought, I wonder if I could do administrative stuff, even though that was where I was actually the type of work I was doing as a performer. So I tried it for a very short time, and I realized immediately that I didn't want to have to face those singers' publicists on a daily basis. I knew this environment so well as a singer. So you know what? Interestingly enough, I can't say that I didn't have moments where, I think it was later in my life I realized I probably didn't grieve that passing of that career. So at the time, I just kind of like moved on. I closed the door. I moved on. I started building another life. But it was interesting. It was an interesting process.
Like you said, the time in San Diego was very short term. It's a lovely part of the country, but I know you have a rather, to me, unusual outlook about the Pacific Coast and the fact that it's the wrong way.
Well, yeah, this is so odd. This has nothing to do with me, except I think my mom instilled this in me because of her. She had a rather unusual upbringing. They had 11 children in her family, and when she was 6 years old, her father died. So that's why I never knew my grandfather. And in that day and age, in the early 20s, meaning 1920s, my God, this was a time when there were all of her relatives had farms, and they were saying, why don't we just split the kids up and we'll take a few of all the, aunts and uncles. And her mom said, no, we're not doing that. So she, literally, it was grapes of wrath. They drove to Northern California and lived, right in the middle of the avocado fields, the grape fields. And my mother worked. Their whole family worked to survive, so their family would not split up. And so for her, she decided to leave and come back to Kansas when she went to college. She always had sort of a tainted feeling about California. Now, we have a lot of relatives there, and there's no one who wouldn't rather jump on a plane to go visit. But she kind of had me in a weird locked and loaded position on my mentality about the West Coast.
So you're only there a year, and what was the decision to come back to the Midwest?
I just thought, this doesn't feel right. But my parents had actually moved from Newton to Kansas City, where my sister is now, and I thought, I just doesn't feel like the right vibe to me. I mean, I had guys on elliptical cycles in my apartment complex reading Bibles. There was just weird. California's got its own thing going. I'm not saying it isn't fabulous, but it's just got its own thing. I thought, if I'm going to have to get plastic surgery immediately, now your whole body is never going to be. You know what I mean? It's the way it is. So I decided to come back to Kansas City, and I got a job with an ad agency here immediately. So it was a good decision.
Through your professional career as a singer and, then starting off into the business world, you did have serious relationships, but you never married. Do you think your lifestyle or the desire to become a star, as it were, had any effect on that?
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, I'm still to this day surprised that more young women in their 20s, don't have sort of like that. A lot of them do, where they put their blinders on. But there's this new thing now where, people are marrying earlier again and blah, blah, blah. My mom was never somebody, or my parents, neither of them were like, can't wait. She never said that.
Right.
She never said that. This was all about, you go find what I think you would love to do. And so that was always my goal. And so dating was never a main focus, at least for many, many years. But that doesn't mean I didn't, date seriously. I dated someone in Chicago that ended up making Target, the name brand that it is.
Right.
And so, there were moments where, I might have, could have, but, that person handed me a recipe book when I wanted to go sing on the stage. I wasn't quite ready to do that.
Right. What was the return to Kansas City and going into the corporate world like for you?
I was very ready at that time, to be, to commit more to working in marketing and PR. And so actually one of the first jobs that they gave me at that ad agency was to work for the Senior PGA Golf Championship. And lo and behold, I started meeting media people at that time, including you, Danny Clinkscale.
That's right. And we'll tell this story quickly. I was married at the time, so I was a very good husband, and I did not have a wandering eye. It doesn't mean I didn't see attractive women and like them, but it just wasn't the same thing. But anyway, I did have contact with Jane, and one of the funniest things is that my first media badge that she made for me, my name is spelled Clinkscale, very simply, clink and then scale, like you step on to weigh yourself. And she spelled my name Klyngsdale, like it was Klingsdale.
I think it was given to me on a list like that, Dan.
Well, make the excuse however you will. But one of the things about the senior tour and having that in the corporate world, you ended up not being as comfortable as you would have liked in that corporate environment. And the transition to creating your own business, Venice Communications, which is now in its 20th year, was aided and abetted by that particular
it's an amazing
enterprise,
story, really.
The Senior PGA Tour.
Oddly enough, I mean, that's really so cool because that first year, you were married. I was dating yet another Englishman.
Who you almost married.
Who I almost married. He had 2% body fat. He was a racing bicyclist. And he's a great guy. So here I meet you, unbeknownst, I don't know, I'm going to eventually marry you. But, that was an amazing thing. Had a great experience managing the PR for that. Worked with a lot of corporations in that world. I ended up also working for Burns & McDonnell Engineering as their first PR specialist on staff, and then director of marketing PR for Mayor Hoffman McCann. But 20 years ago, I did get a spark, and I had a lot of people think, that I might want to try my hand building my own business. I think maybe because of my background and doing my own thing and being able to manage, what you do in opera is you put teams together of really creative people. And that's now what I've been doing for 20 years in the PR and marketing business. But what was so great when I decided I literally started my business from scratch. I didn't have one client. And the first breakfast meeting I had was with Joan Israelite at First Watch in Westport. And the first thing she asked me was, well, what have you done? And I said, well, the Senior PGA Golf Championship. And she goes, did you see the paper today? Sure enough, front page, TD Waterhouse had just signed on as the sponsor. I won that business in 2 weeks. I put a team together, won that business 2 weeks, met you again, and we got married 2 years later.
But still, it's a great challenge, and you were fortunate but obviously you won the business, so it wasn't just like some stroke of luck. But to have a very good contract right off the bat, that must have been something that, made the transition, the challenge of the daunting aspect of creating your own business a little bit more smooth.
Gosh, it really did help. So it gives you a little access to having some time to start developing other relationships to build your business. And so it bided me time, to really look at how to diversify my business. And so it's been a fantastic run. And, this city also, this is something I think is really valuable given what's happened with Kansas City since that time. I mean, before I met you and before I started my business, I really questioned whether I wanted to stay in Kansas City because I was like, there's nothing going on downtown. I've lived in all these big cities. Where do I go have a great dinner? Where's the disco? Things like that, really important things. And I was almost on my way out the doorway until, I decided Mayor Barnes came in and things started turning around. I met you. It's really been an amazing ride because I consciously decided instead of being part of the problem and walking away, why not be part of a city that is really starting to thrive on its own? And look what's happened in the last 20 years.
It's a long story, but I trust you can tell it a little bit shorter. When you're starting, you get your own business, and right off the bat, you're running the PR for the golf tournament, and that's where we met.
Well,
officially re-met, I guess.
Officially re-met. Well, yeah, this was what's so weird. Okay, so I didn't know this at the time, but I had broken up with my UK 2% body fat boyfriend, and I think it was January or February, we had media day, which is always like what you do 4 or 5 months before the tournament, just sort of prep and get media excited about what's going to be happening, who's going to be at the tournament. And it was really odd because late in that event, all of a sudden you showed up and I was like, oh, I remember this guy. And so we talked for like 2 seconds, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I had to leave before the thing was over.
Yeah, you were like there, and then all of a sudden you were walking out the doorway and...
Well, I got you in my gaze and I didn't give up. But,
yeah, I was like...
But I was pretty much in a super flirty period of time after my transition out of my first marriage, which was difficult, but you get over it. And so then the next time we met would be the first day of the golf tournament, and I didn't exactly create a great impression.
Yeah, I'll say. So here he gives me the eye at media day, and I have to say, I was thinking about you. I was like, well, that's interesting. You just were cute, long hair. Long hair always does it. By the way, guys. But then we met up, and then who's being the jerk about the bad media parking? All these terrible things, bad media food. They had to walk miles on gravel. And of course, he was looking at me as if I'd made all these plans personally to make his day bad. But he was such a jerk, I couldn't help but like him.
And eventually we would get married, and that's a subtext to what went on. But when did you sort of feel like in your professional life that returning to, you always sang, but I think as the years have gone on, as your business has become solidified and everything else, you've sort of maybe refound your love and desire to really have to sing.
Yeah, I also felt, in opera, if you don't keep the one good muscle you have going, it's going to go away. So I guess maybe it was like 10 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. I started thinking, it might be worth it. I can't, obviously go do, an opera production because I can't do it on my own time. But if I do concerts, there might be an opportunity to do this again. So the spark hit, and I've been doing concerts ever since throughout Kansas City and Lawrence, some other areas where I can, find a really good venue. Sometimes that's been duet recitals with my dear, fabulous baritone friend, Thomas Dries. He and his significant other, Evans Mirages, are part of Cincinnati Opera. And so I keep really well connected with a number of people in the business, and try to work with the professionals that I worked with when I was still singing professionally, and it's been a wonderful experience.
You feel like, and I think it's true, being around during this period of time, that you're singing really as well as you ever have. Do you find that maybe even surprising?
Yeah, it is odd because, your voice is getting older just like your rest of your body is. But I think part of it is to do with, I have more time to just relax into the music, and I get to pick what I want to do. I'm completely in charge of the repertoire, and I'm doing it completely for the love of it. And I'm hoping the people that I'm working with are feeling the same way. And I think, in the business, I was wanting to always please everybody. And that maybe been a difficult thing, because I think the singers that do really well in the actual business of it, you just kind of like put your blinders on like a racehorse and decide, this is the way I'm going to go with my technique. Now I've been able to work on my technique on my own with help of others, great people. But it's just, it's a joy to sing, and it always has been a joy. But that joy, I think, anytime somebody puts a piece of music on that they love, it transcends you. Music transcends people no matter what. That's why it's so important for kids to still study music as they're growing up, because it puts a different perspective on your life.
We haven't had children together, but throughout our entire relationship, we've seen my children grow. They were very young when you met them. It's not easy to be a stepmom per se. And a lot of times they lived away for several years. What has that dynamic been like for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question, Danny. I've never heard that you asked that question. At first it was complicated, as you know. I think it is for anyone in that position, because, the children, when parents are breaking up, especially your older daughter, was definitely worried that what did she do to cause this? And that's just devastating to watch that psychological process going on with children. So that was really hard. And, your prior family functions very differently than I do.
Right.
So, it's you have to make a decision. Am I going to jump on board and try to play in that sandbox, or give your kids a different perspective on a different way to play in your own sandbox? And so you're always trying. It's been probably the most rewarding experience in the end, because you really have to step back and think about how you're affecting your children's lives, and it's so important.
And I can see now that they're grown up, and I think that you have your natural battles. Like you said, the sandboxes were entirely different. There's no question about that. But now it's a joy for me to see the relationship you have with them.
Well, it's amazing. I've still sort of been shocked, because I try to, knowing I'm not their mom, I'm on the sidelines, and that's always where I wanted to be, because I don't expect to try to take the place of their biological mother in any way, shape, or form. But what's been shocking to me is, your older daughter, unbeknownst to us at the time, she decides to jump the United States to go to the United Kingdom, to University of London to study, and she got her degree there. Who knew that that would inspire her? I never thought she was listening when I talked about these experiences. So that's been fantastic. And my your daughter, my stepdaughter, is studying theater in New York. Who would ever have guessed?
Right, and took a while to get to that point, but is going to a very esteemed acting school now and doing the struggles that people do in a big city. Just to speak a little bit now about where you are with your music, to the point where you did have an idea to have a music academy, and you did a lot of work to try and make that happen, and it's a very difficult thing to do. Arts takes big money, big donors, but still it was an effort worth trying, don't you think?
It was. I won't bore you with all the details, but there was a property not far from where we live, actually, that I had this odd aha moment where it could potentially be like an Interlochen of the Midwest for talented, potential professional high school kids to audition to get in. And
some underprivileged kids.
And underprivileged kids. That was a huge part of it. It's tricky. It's tricky because you have to get a lot of funding for that. But what's so important is when I was looking into that, I'll give you an idea. People that were trying to work on this with me, I went up to the Chicago Academy for the Performing Arts, which is a small version of that, just outside of downtown Chicago. And they were so fantastic. They opened the doors for us to watch what transpires with these high school kids when they have this tremendous love for dance, jazz piano, theater, or opera. To walk in classrooms like that, it is the most inspiring thing to see that. Because not all of them are going to make it big, but I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. Performing arts, I couldn't be where I am today without having that amazing history and opportunity to study with these great musicians. It makes you a better person. It makes you value culture in a different way. And that's what I saw for this school, is not necessarily making the next, Metropolitan Opera stars or ballet stars, but giving an opportunity for talented people to have that experience.
Over the last decade plus, you had the great opportunity to have two parents who were so influential in your life live pretty long and healthful lives, but they both passed, and I've seen the grieving process in each case, and it's been a difficult one because clearly that showed the care they gave you and the absolute love that you had for your parents.
Now you're going to get... He's doing a Barbara Walters on me. You're doing a Barbara Walters. It's hard partly because I didn't get married till later in life. I probably was closer and spent more time with my parents, and they had us older. So they died younger than a lot of, friends of mine from my class. But they were just so supportive. They were so supportive. They might have been perfectionists, and some people might have thought that they could be, they wouldn't want to live under that. But I just felt that, especially take my mother's background, she was not given an opportunity to spread her own wings. And she let me do it. She was the one that said, take your chance. Even if you don't, go over the mountain and go all the way, it's so valuable to let your wings fly. And that is so valuable. And if more parents could just, even if you don't have the money to do that, to open your heart to letting your kids be who they want to be. And because my parents were a bit oppressed when they were growing up with their parents, they didn't want to have that happen to me and my sister. So, I thank God that they were on the earth for a time so I could experience that.
One of the joys of being married to you, among many, is that we both love to travel. And you've done a lot of traveling in your life, and it clearly is a passion that you want to carry forth for the rest of your life. Because we've been to, we're not wealthy people, but we've been to a lot of great places in our time together. You did that when you were young. You went to school abroad. It's clearly a very important part of your life.
I guess that's true. When you're exposed to different cultures when you're younger, it's just it gets you away from your everyday life, and you can see how other people live and experience other cultures and realize that there were other ways of doing things. I mean, we can go down to Mexico or we can go to south of France and see new ways of doing things, but also different topography. It just is so valuable, and also understanding how other people view the world. It's not all about us in the United States.
In closing, you've touched on it in a certain way throughout this interview, but just kind of think about it in the form of, what do you think your life would have been like without music?
Wow, I don't even know how to answer that. It's almost impossible. It is so part of our everyday. I mean, even when I wasn't singing, my mother had the music on. While just doing daily work, there was something going on. Or my sister was playing, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and we were dancing on our green shag carpet in the basement. We were having fun with music throughout our lives. It's incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible.
And what do you think music carried into all the other areas of your life, even when it wasn't all the part of your life anymore?
It's freedom. Studying music gives you a sense of free thinking, free thought. And even if I'm sitting in there in the middle of doing a proposal for a client or whatever, that creative flowing brain power I can always tap into it, no matter what I'm doing. So I would say that's what music and studying music has given me, is an opportunity to just let your ideas flow mentally, and so you can come up with a better answer or a better way to solve a problem for a client, or a better way for us to raise my stepchildren, your children. It's a gift. It's a gift.
And what's the joy when you are singing?
It's so visceral. A sense of power. And a sense of that I can, just for this moment, control the emotions of the people in the room, just for that moment.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.